Hey everyone, I am coming to you with a video that is going to detail how to write a press release. Sort of the three talking points are: what is a press release? Probably the most important one. What does a press release typically include? And then the third one is the evolution of what the press release has sort of become and manifested itself into, transformed itself into over time with the advent of technology. And with that third point of the evolution, also thinking about it from the perspective of how does things like the algorithms, so search engine optimization, how do all of those factor into what a typical protocol looks like for a press release. If you have taken News Gathering 1, a lot of this should be pretty important information that you've come across and you've probably practiced a good bit. So hopefully we'll have some overlapping thoughts there. So fundamentally, a press release is a release to the press, sometimes referred to as a news release, sometimes referred to as a media release. Functionally, historically, talking point number one, a press release was used pre-internet, pre-broadcast in terms of how we view it today. And it was to release information from a company to the press, so to the people who are typically covering stories, journalists and people like that. And then they are going to take the information from the press release and be able to write stories about it, to disclose information about it, to talk about it. And so historically, it was a really good tool, and still is to an extent, depending on the industry, to announce information on behalf of the company to the world, and then the people who are going to write stories for the New York Daily Gazette and other things like that. They had access to information, key bits of information. And so that's not to say that press releases don't still exist. They absolutely do, and that they're not valuable, because they absolutely are. More than anything, the press release sort of manifests itself in an email. More often than not, you have the corresponding press release that goes out to as part of a pitch to a company, to a brand who's maybe writing a feature piece about something related to your industry. You want to get a feature in it, you send them some sort of press release email. And there's a guide to that linked on Blackboard. So what I thought would be helpful is to show you an image, an illustration. Let's switch things here. On the left-hand side, what you'll see is an image that talks about the inverted pyramid. And in short, an inverted pyramid is the way that you go into a press release. Functionally, is you lead. The lead of the story is the most important bits of information. If and the general rule here is the lead is designed so if the person only reads one thing, they only read the first paragraph of text, they should know all the main summarized, synthesized details: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Right? So again, if they're only clipping one thing, if they're only taking that and they only spend 20 seconds reading a thing, the lead is the most important bit. And so we have to make sure that we get that right off the jump. And then, of course, after that, we can go into more in-depth information. We can go into crucial information, important information that you might want to detail. If it's, let's say, the new release of an Android phone or an iPhone or a Tesla or whatever it is, there's probably important information that doesn't make it into the lead, but people who are, let's say, experts in a field, somebody who writes about the automotive industry, the lead will not give them sufficient information to write a blog post about the new Tesla, because the information that comes after the lead in the body is probably the information that's going to be most pertinent. I don't know anything about cars, but miles per hour, gas mileage, how long a battery can charge, whatever it is, right? That would probably be included in the body. And then at the tail end, anything extra, how to contact a person, information that is nice little tidbits, something that could be a quotation in particular is usually what happens. And just to highlight what a lead looks like here, I went to Facebook's investor page accidentally. I literally just typed in Facebook investor, or I didn't type in investor at all. I typed in Facebook press release, and this is the thing that came up. And Drew Houston, who's apparently a person, the co-founder and CEO of Dropbox, has been appointed to the company's board of directors effective immediately. This is the basic press release. This is the lead: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how. How is a little bit lacking, but there is a release that happens because this dude, who is apparently important, is elected to the board, or appointed, to the board of directors. So if you're only looking for the key details that is summarized at the beginning here, then there's a Mark Zuckerberg quote, then there's some stuff from the guy, and blah, 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 co-founder, there's credentials, about Facebook, contacts, so on and so forth. So again, the lead. This is all you really need to know. Now, if you want a quote from Zuckerberg to write in your New York Times article talking about why it's a bad idea that the Dropbox CEO is on the company's board of directors, I don't know if that's true. You would go to a quote about from, let's say, the founder and CEO of Facebook. Okay? But to the second point, which I've talked about a lot, what does it include? It just includes major details that you would need to release to the public. You would want the public to know. And ultimately, if they don't have those details, they're going to inquire about those details and they're going to ask you questions, and we don't want questions. We want all that to be answered. Okay. So number one, what is a press release? Answer that. Number two, what does it include? Inverted pyramid, the lead, the body, a little bit of the tail of that inverted pyramid. But the evolution is a little bit interesting because there are a lot of mechanisms, mostly because of social media, mostly because of the internet, for a company to talk about information in a non-press release fashion. So for instance, Facebook does this a lot. They have a press release section on their website, but they also have just news from Facebook. Like for instance, they have a newsroom page that lands everything here, and they say hello to Messenger, introducing new messaging features for Instagram. And so here is basically a glorified internal blog post that's externally faced. So the head of Instagram and the head of Messenger write this blog post. There's a corresponding video that explains it. And what they're really doing right here, and let's just pretend that this is kind of the lead, even though it's structured a little bit differently. What they're doing here is they're giving us the who, what, the when, the where, the why. Today we're announcing an update to Instagram DMs by introducing a new Messenger experience on the app. Messaging has come a long way, hyperlinked since we first brought it back to Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So the way that they're written it is sort of this first-person narrative. It's an informal approach. Press releases are typically buttoned up. They are written objectively. They're simply statements of fact and detail. This one has a lot of depth. It obviously has the richness of new media in comparison to a traditional press release like this one right here, which is strictly text, statement of information, no flash, no frills. It is written from a very objective standpoint, okay? This is, in a lot of ways, this could be and probably is a new age look of a press release, right? This information is going to ultimately manifest itself in terms of things that are consumable for the viewer, for the people who are interested. So somebody who is writing articles for BuzzFeed about new technology will come across this article and have to scour and find information that they're going to use for an article that they write. Now, you can be the judge as to if this buttoned up sort of black and white statement of fact is more effective, or this color popping richness, some details. What I would have advised them to do, although they don't care about my opinions, is I would have put these features after the first paragraph. So basically treat it lead, bullet points, and go. But again, going to the newsroom, here is a basic transcript from a commentary from the VP and Chief Privacy Officer who talks about a path forward for privacy and online advertising. So there's a lot of different ways to distribute and send information. What I find particularly interesting about Facebook, and those of you who've watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix can maybe attest to this idea as well, is that Facebook in particular, and the reason that I chose them for this particular video, they have a lot of nuance to the way that they communicate with the public. They have Facebook Live. They have Facebook videos of Mark Zuckerberg saying things. They have traditional press releases that makes a lot of sense because this dude is joining the board of directors. That is a press release. The board of directors is probably a very archaic group of humans, so it makes sense that that would be the thing that they do is a traditional press release. This article right here saying hi to Messenger with an emoji is much more customer-facing, right? But then when they are talking and addressing the issues, what the Social Dilemma gets wrong, it doesn't look like either of those first two. It doesn't look like a traditional press release, because that would just be an objective statement of facts. It doesn't really look like this personal message from Adam and Stan, the heads of Instagram and Messenger. It looks a little bit different. But what they do is they put together what is a visually appealing document that goes into the different nuances of what the documentary that highly featured Facebook in particular, and they don't have contact information. This is sort of the lead in a little bit. It's more of an introduction paragraph than anything else. But ultimately what they're doing here is they're still communicating a message. In this document, if you were to look it up, and let's let's go ahead and look it up. Facebook social dilemma. I did this earlier. If you were to look up the Facebook, let's put this side by side really quick. If you were to look up this response here on the left-hand side, the thing that they created, again, not a press release, not a press release simultaneously, you will see that this and the details that they include in this response to, I guess, the broad public. In some ways, it's not necessarily a direct response to the creators. It's not a direct response to Netflix, the service provider. It's not a direct response necessarily to the person or people who created the social dilemma. But instead what it is a response broadly to everybody. It's kind of a catch-all. They're not directly messaging specific people. And then if you just type in that response, the things that they have included here are being cited social media today, which I read regularly. Vulture, CNBC, The Verge, Los Angeles Times, right? New York Times, so on and so forth. So what does that ultimately mean? All of those things brought in together, what does that mean? It means that as a mega company, as arguably one of the most known companies in the world, top 5, top 2, I don't know what the number is, they have to make very strategic choices as to how they communicate messages to their specific publics. They have a dude join the board of directors that's very buttoned up. It's very old-fashioned. They put out a traditional press release. They have a new feature that is being launched. They put it out as a message, not in their newsroom necessarily. They have critiques from the Social Dilemma documentary, and then they put it out in this format that isn't really in the same formatting or structure as anything else. I mean, it doesn't even look like it. The tone is completely different. The aesthetic's different. They don't have any imagery to help illustrate the issues, although I'm not saying that they necessarily need to. And they are going through these 7 different points. So ultimately, what happens here is that you want to think about how a brand can best communicate and build relationships, maintain relationships with their consumer, with their customers, with their other business partners. So sometimes press release is the right answer, sometimes an alternative, sometimes it's a tweet, sometimes it is a video. Ultimately, with a press release, we're just trying to explain, provide information to as many people as possible. Thanks.